and uncertain, and all of a sudden the door opens and we get an interview with Juan, we get an interview with Pepin, we get our first preliminary interview with Nick Melillo, which we had to reshoot because we were drunk. Not him, but us. And all of the footage was out of focus. And then a mariachi band started playing at 3 a.m. outside of his apartment. Yeah. And, you know, we got to interview Perdomo and AJ Fernandez and all these other people that, you know, from this one trip. And also it was the catalyst to introduce us to all these other people that later on in future trips we would interview and talk to. And so, you know, we, you know, at Placencia and, you know, with Nestor and all these, like everybody sort of came from this trip, from this one moment that we were sitting in this fishing village and some guy was like, hey, you need to talk to my nephew, and hands us a cell phone. And we're like, all right, sure. You know,
this is where you again, I just like Juan Martinez, I really believe in the, you know, Juan Martinez in the in this film, Hand Road, talks about the spiritual aspect of cigars. Mm-hmm. And listening to you now, this is that moment. I, like yourself, I work with a nonprofit organization. I'm part of it. It's a Buddhist organization. Mm-hmm. Listening to you guys also, you volunteer, you work, and the truth comes out. The truth comes out because that's what Cigars does. So to you guys, that after that moment with Juan Martinez, when he talks about the fact that we, and I believe he's speaking as the likes of us, we are servants. We are here to serve the people.
Yeah.
And listening to your journey, and one of the most beautiful aspects of this, the reason I'm bringing this up, one of the touching thing about this, your film, it touches the philanthropical aspect of it, where a lot of schools out of the tobacco region, they've really, the companies have really invested out of their pocket, into the educating aspect. What was that? How, you know, I was emotional when I watched that aspect of the story. You know, the helping of the kids, pushing them to go to school to get the best of education. You know, how did you guys? What was that like for you guys? And that was very, very, very pivotal. That was a very pivotal aspect of it.
For us, we didn't know a whole lot about it, just like everybody else. You don't know unless you know. So it was very important for us to show that the cigar industry is not a selfish industry, the premium handmade cigar industry. So they've built infrastructure and they've paved roads, sewage systems, and they build schools, and there's medical clinics on most larger cigar factories have medical clinics on site. And daycares and sometimes small schools on site. And you're referring to the Cigar Family Foundation, which is owned by the Fuente family and the Jason Newman family. So, and I mean, they have anywhere from daycare for babies all the way through high school, and I think college now too, right?
I mean, when we were interviewing, I think one of their early students had just gotten their doctorate.
Yeah,
and,
so they've done all of that to give back to the industry, to take care of their employees. A lot of these factories, if not all of them, if I remember correctly, feed their employees breakfast and lunch. So you're getting meals, and sometimes the kids only get meals at school that day, and that's provided by the cigar industry. They might not have enough money. Their parents might not have enough money to feed them dinner, but they're getting breakfast and lunch at least. So these are the stories that needed to be told so that people see what the cigar industry fully is all about.
Yeah, and I think that's lost a little bit, you know, in sort of developed countries, and you think, well, you know, they're making all this money off of them or whatever, and, you know, there's sort of a way to throw shade on it and, you know, talk about like the evils of capitalism or whatever. But honestly, we didn't want to take the movie down this road because we just felt like it was sort of missing the point. But, you know, we interviewed some farm workers, and it was in the early days, and we didn't have a proper translator, so we had some trouble with those interviews. But I got the gist from one of them. You know, she said, look, I'm just here picking tobacco, and it's hot, and it's sweaty, and it's hard work. And I'm like, what would you do if you didn't have this? Like, could there, you know, are there other opportunities? And she's like, no, like what? I don't want to do anything else. You know, I spent some time picking tomatoes for another farmer, and it was 10 times worse. You know, and it's like, people don't understand, like, in some of these countries and in some of these economies, like the average the average salary is like $70-$80 a month or something like that. And the cigar industry almost ubiquitously pays double, triple like the national average, even just for like some of the lowest, you know, employees that they hire, you know, even for day laborers or, you know, seasonal workers, they're taking care of them. And it's just like, you know, is it great? Would you want that job? Well, maybe not, but it's certainly better than, you know, what the other options are there, you know. And it's like, you got to do something with what you have. And what we saw is a lot of companies are doing a lot more than they have to.
Yeah.
Yes. And you thank you guys for highlighting that. I thought that was very, very important. You know, because like I said, I'm very fortunate to spend time behind the scenes with you know, with these guys, just random conversations. And one of the things I noticed, and I asked a very wonderful friend of mine, Laurent. Laurent's a good friend of what's his name from Tatuage.
Oh, Pete Johnson.
They're good friend. Yeah, Pete Johnson. And, you know, I was interviewing him last week, and we were talking. And halfway through, I said, Laurent, did you start this cigar game to make money? He said, absolutely not. I just love cigars, and I like to push the limit of what I can blend. And I just love to see people around the world smoke my cigar, comment on it, and that brings me joy in my heart. Yeah. Did you find that with a lot of the cigar individuals you met? Because it's like a bunch of entrepreneurs, and you know, let me be very careful with the word entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are people who take risks, like us. We are entrepreneurs, right? We do a lot of things, weddings, this, that. Here we are, you know, we're doing this kind of stuff that most huge, you know, companies wouldn't even dare touch, right? Here we are, we're having that discussion, we're going down that road, we're talking about this. But did you feel that these people, when this type of disaster happened, they have nothing to lose because they will rebuild it again? Did you feel that? Did you feel that energy? Did you think that's also missing from our world?
Everybody in the cigar industry that we've met, that was genuine. Everybody that we've interviewed, everybody that we've tried to include in the movie, they have a genuine passion for the tobacco leaf. They have a genuine passion for people, the people they employ, and for the industry as a whole. The people that we meet that, if I can be candid, are money hungry and about that aspect from the cigar industry, because you can make money, obviously. But the people that are all about the dollar are the bad actors that you see on social media and things like that. And these are the guys that get weeded out, I think, over time. And the grifters. Exactly. The true lovers of the craft and the passionate ones of the craft are the ones that have been in this industry for generations to come. Generations of the past, generations to come. They're the ones that started up in the 90s and the early 2000s also, that are still sticking through, and like my father's cigars, Tatuaje, they've been around. They're celebrating 20 years here soon, or 20 years, yeah. And they're not going anywhere. So people like that are the ones that you see that truly care about people, and they're making money as a result of their passion and their hard work, but they're not money hungry, and you don't see that on their faces. The ones that you see that on their faces, they're the bad actors that you see from time to time online.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where time tells, you know. It tells because there's no option here, you know. The second you decide to put a tobacco seed in the ground, you're 5 years out, well, let's say maybe 3 to 5 years out from it becoming this, so, you could buy tobacco, you can rent space, you can do all this stuff, but the question is like, are you reinvesting back into your craft? Are you reinvesting back into everything? And, there's companies right now that we're working with that are doing that, like Blackbird Cigar is a great example, the guys there, they're just putting everything they have right back into it. And they're starting at a time where, holy shit, man, to start a cigar company like today, these days, you got to have some balls.
Especially in the US.
As a small manufacturer, you gotta rely on other people for your tobacco. You gotta, fight to get good rollers and, facilities and all this stuff. It's not easy to do. And then you got to store everything and age it. And, you're not just putting this together one day and selling it the next. There's a whole process that needs to be done. Same with, foundation, right? Nick took a huge risk leaving his, job at Drew Estate and, where he'd been there for
14 or so.
I don't know, more than a decade. And he was the guy there, and he had, they call him Nicaragua for a reason. He lived there. He spent all his time there, that was his passion. And so he just jumped out and did his own thing. And at a time when the uncertainty with all the regulations and everything was at its highest, he's like, fuck it, I'm just going to do it. That, you can see the genuine nature of somebody's intentions by what they're doing with what they have. And Nick, again, like day in, day out, he's reinvesting everything he has back into his passion. And, he's been a huge proponent of what we've done with Hand Rolled. And, it's like, it's crazy to me. Like, I don't know. I don't know that I'd have the tenacity or the balls to say like, yeah, I'm going to start a cigar company like in today's climate. Whoa.
It was interesting, also I think, like you guys, I've been very fortunate to have gone to Cuba and Dominican Republic. And I have to say, and I want to re-add to something you said, I've seen it, firsthand, them being fed, a bus brings them into work. But I just love the fact that everyone I've ever met in the cigar industry are always constantly smiling. They're happy. Even the process to roll that cigar, you can see in their face. What was that like for you guys in the factory amongst these people? From especially coming from where we come from, which is, as you know, without mentioning any names or putting anyone down, the greed, the ego is at an all-time high. You seeing that, was it humbling to you guys? Or how many did you, what was that process like for you guys?
I think the best way to sum up what you're asking is we have a clip. It's in the movie, but we have a clip on our Instagram from Delicia, who is the cigar vixen on Instagram, who's a great friend of ours, and we interviewed her. The clip that we put up last week talks about how she said every time she walks through a factory, she just sees smiles. Everybody's happy. Everybody's happy to be working. Everybody's happy, and they're being taken care of, so that shows through their work as well. And that's exactly what we experienced. Every time we went to factories, all we saw was smiles. It could be because I'm gorgeous, but but really, it's just everybody's just happy. Everybody's happy. You can't be happy 100% of the time. Everybody's going through their own shit, but general sense of the word, people are happy, and they're employed and they're getting taken care of. Their kids are getting taken care of and fed. It's great.
There's something when, Jesse and I are both Romanian. We grew up here in the States, but we've been back to Romania a bunch of times, visiting our family, and Romania is a more developed country these days. But when I was a kid, going back there, one thing that you got a sense of on people's faces, one thing I got a sense of on people's faces and in the conversations is like a sense of insecurity that comes with, that brings about just this like cloud that's sort of always over you, and it ruins your like your posture as a person. It ruins, like, you can just tell there's something there that's fear driven and fear based. And when you walk through these factories in Nicaragua and the Dominican, in Cuba, in Honduras, you get the sense that, people, like, you can look around and you can see, like, the town and everything. It's not like a wealthy area, but there's not that sense of like insecurity. There's not that sense of like, I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. It's like people are happy if they know that they have some security in their work and some security with their kids, and they're not constantly stressed about, what tomorrow is going to bring. And you just see that throughout the cigar industry in a way that you don't see it everywhere else.
Wow, you just revealed what
we're not
I
gypsies either.
Watching.
If that's what you were thinking.
No, you're not. No, not at all. Not at all. I've been very blessed to have gone to Romania, and because part of my journey as an actor, you get films that go on location. Yeah. So I'm part of that generation. I mean, Highlander 4, one of the films I worked on earlier on as a young actor, was shot in Romania. So I got to spend 3 months in Romania. I got to travel. I went to Ceausescu's palace. And the reason I'm bringing this up, and I have a best friend of mine is Romania, in London. He's moved back to Bucharest now. But what's interesting, now it all makes sense. Because the perspective and the way you shot this film had to be, for me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it had to be from an understanding of, it had to be from children who had parents who understand communism, who understand, who've seen ego at its top. Ceausescu was this man that everyone feared, and I've been to that palace in Bucharest, and the people just said, enough of this, and took him out, right? So now it makes sense, because when I was watching the film, and again, I'm going to stress this, please, if you haven't seen Hand Roll, these guys have put it out there. They've literally just threw it out there on YouTube. Watch it. And because it makes sense now with your journey as children of that great grandparents. How did that come into play for both of you? And both of you being Romanian, living in LA? I mean, talk to me on this one. I'm sorry we're digressing, because that's what cigars are. That's what we do. I don't even have to smoke, and I'm already like, I feel it. That's what we do. This is Oris Erhuero. This is our center. This is what we do in the cigar world. We start here. We never know where the hell we're gonna go. We know we're gonna end up, depending on who we're speaking to. But I'm speaking to people like you that I feel I'm getting more comfortable. I'm really, I'm getting the sense that you guys really, you come from a background where you guys are very grateful. And I sense that in the film. It wasn't done out of malice. It wasn't done out of watching two worlds compete with each other. And even when that moment in the film where you could see that, I love how you guys step back and watch them had that little sensitive moment, if that makes any sense. What was that like for you guys? And then also give me a bit of your background, that Romanian background, because it really, I could see it. I could see that discipline through your take on something very sensitive. That's a very, we're talking tobacco here.
Well,
that's a $700 million company. Money-making world, right? They say.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, but, one thing I think that as like first generation Americans, from parents that grew up in under communism. I mean, Jesse and I were 4 and 5 when the Ceausescu was assassinated, and I mean, I still remember. I don't know if you do, but I remember like Romanians in the States got together celebrating. Like people were like, it was just, the way that some of the Cubans talked about in Miami talked about when Fidel died. Like the streets were filled and people went out and like you had this craziness. I just remember I didn't understand exactly what was happening at the time. I was just a little kid, but like people were congregating, talking, phones were ringing off the hook, families were getting together, like making sure everybody's okay, and at the same time celebrating and all this stuff. It's like you don't do that if you if there's not a sense of if there's not a real sense of importance to what just happened. Like you have to look. I mean, it's all complex, right? Like there's a degree in which you can take the view, bringing it back to the cigar industry. You could take the view of like imperialism or colonialism, and there's certainly a degree of that needs to be touched on, but there was no way to really touch on the cigar world without talking about Cuba to some degree. And I'm not going to sit here and be the wildest proponent of capitalism or something like that, but having parents that experience both things, they can objectively say one thing is better than the other. That doesn't mean one thing is perfect, but it does mean that objectively one thing is better than the other, and your life in one is objectively better than your life in the other. And throughout the film, there were undertones, and we interviewed Hiroshi and we let him speak his mind, and we really wanted to let him have his say about everything and not totally drown him out. But at the same time, there were Cuban Americans that we interviewed that were like, look, man, these are the hells that we lived through, and there's just no way to tell the story of cigars without talking about Cuba, and there's no way to talk about Cuba without talking about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is Castro and his regime. And so, yeah, I mean, you get the sense of resilience, like we've talked about. You look at the Plasencia family and having to restart, and what they're doing in Nicaragua and in Honduras is huge. You get the Quesadas, like every major family, the Padrones, every major family has their story of resilience there, and I don't think it's coincidence that overwhelmingly it's opposed to the communist government and the communist regime. And I don't know. I mean, not to get on too long of a thing here, but it had to. We had to talk about it to some degree. And I think Marvin summed it up best in his interview, where he said, if you talk about the Cuban people and the American people, they love each other. It's a problem with the governments. Mm-hmm. And overwhelmingly, that's what we sort of wanted to say with that point. But also, it would not be complete without including, people like the Guayabera lady. Sorry, her name is Berta. Yeah. Who, like she said it in the film. She's like, I'll never smoke another Cuban cigar until Cuba is free. And it's like, you don't say something like that if your life experience didn't dictate how important that is to you.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important for us, especially for me, when I talk about Hand Roll the film, I actually felt it was the heart and soul and the honesty of what people need to understand about the elders in the cigar world and the younger generation, which is the new world cigars. That's what I felt about your film. I just felt it's one of those films that should have been in the Oscars, for best documentary. Because no, I'm serious. I'm being honest, and it's the first time I've seen a documentary, and I'm surprised it wasn't into. You guys didn't go into the documentary film festival in Amsterdam, because this would have been a perfect topic.
They don't like
and the
tobacco.
reason I say this is. No, they don't like tobacco. Yeah, right.
Well, officially, they don't like tobacco.
Yeah. It's interesting because you can't walk through Amsterdam without smelling.
Yeah.
You get it, right? We could go there, right? Oh man, there's so much. There's so many things, man. If you guys ever do a part 2, part 3, or part 4 of this, there's so many topics we could go on. With Hand Road regarding that. And what's interesting, let me bring this back, but I don't want to digress like an amazing cigar here. It's the first time I've seen all 3 components. Like combined together and very balanced. It's like I watched 2 filmmakers blended. They edited. You guys really blend. And what was that process like? Because I felt like the way you edit the film, the way this film was edited, was very well blended. It reminded me of, the master blender for Davidoff. The way he put it. That's what I felt in the way you edit the film. Was that done on purpose?
Yeah.
Or was that naturally done?
Everything. We shot all the interviews with a rough idea of what we wanted the end product to be, while not letting our egos getting in the way of the storytelling itself. And letting the story, for lack of a better phrase, reveal itself to us. I hate how pretentious that sounds. But so one of the things we did is we hired one of the best editors that we know personally, Edward Coma, who was not a cigar smoker at the time. And we went through the process of cutting all the interviews down and editing everything together. I think we started off with like a 6-hour.
It was more. I mean, there was like a 20-hour timeline and then like a 6-hour timeline, and then I think the final timeline that I gave Edward was 4.5 hours.
Yeah. So we gave him this 4.5-hour timeline. And we said, okay, you're removed from the cigar industry. You know nothing about the cigar industry. He got a crash course in it by watching all the footage. But we said, we're too attached to everything. You get the final say on what goes in there. We did have some conversations where we kind of like, hey, we'd really like this manufacturer to be in there. Or, he wanted to cut someone and we tried to fight for them to be in there. But at the end of the day, it was his decision. So it was 3 hard months of us living in the studio, basically crashing on the couch, waking up in the morning, back to editing, and getting all that stuff prepared, handing it over to Edward and him putting together what you see now, the 1.5 hours that you guys see now. And so that was all credit to him, and he really came through. And
you have to trust the storyteller, the manufacturers gave us that trust when they let us interview them. And then we bestowed that trust down the line to somebody that we really respected as somebody that understands story, that understands, putting together, like weaving together this complex, series of interviews. And, all we could kind of do is say to him, like, here's the general story, here's the flow and the outline. But, at this point, we're going to entrust it over to you because you're good at what you do. You're excellent.
And not only him, Brian Steckler, Serge Lysek, who was our music director, and the 3 of us essentially shot the whole movie. The 3 of us traveled together. We all wore all the hats. But Serge, as the music director, officially brought in Brian Steckler, who wrote or who composed this beautiful soundtrack for us from scratch, down to like there's a shot where cigarettes are falling down and hitting the table. I mean, he's tapping the table with the mic there to get that sound of the cigarette. Every little sound effect, every little everything, he poured his heart into that as well for us. And so it was such a great team effort of super talented people. And for us to just say, you know what, we know what we're good at. We know what everybody else is good at. Let's all come together and just fucking killed this project. And that's what you get to see today is the beautiful culmination of everybody's talents coming together.
Even the narrator that we have, Peter Weller, who was RoboCop, like we were sitting with Pete Johnson at the Grand Havana one day in LA, and we're like, well, we need a narrator. And out of the corner of Pete's eye, in walks Peter Weller, and he's like, why don't we just ask Peter to do it? And we're like, yeah, well, why don't we just ask Peter to do it,